ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಹಿರಿಯ ನ್ಯಾಯಮೂರ್ತಿ ನಾಗೇಶ್ವರ ರಾವ್ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬನ್ನಿ ನೋಡೋಣ.
Is the criticism that is made. There was a judgment in 1930s which is called the Caroline Products that was delivered by the US Supreme Court that pertained to interstate commerce where filled milk was being transported from one state to the other state, and there was a federal law that was made prohibiting such transportation. When the legislation was challenged, the Supreme Court rejected the challenge, upheld the law, and Justice Stone wrote the judgment for the court and said that a rational review is to be followed for the purpose of reviewing legislations, and interference should not normally be made. But there was a footnote that he added to his judgment, which is the most famous footnote in the judicial circles, which is to the effect that in matters pertaining to rights of the discrete and insular minorities, the review to be done by the court would be strict. So legislations curtailing the liberty and the rights of the minorities and individuals would be getting a serious look by the court, and judicial review is permitted. This footnote of Caroline Products has been reproduced profitably in judgments of this court while dealing with certain constitutional issues, which I will deal with a little later. Coming to India and the difficulty of counter-majoritarian, which I was talking about, which was propounded by Andrew Bickle, the difficulty is slightly different in this country. Let us see how judicial review of legislations has taken a place in the Constitution. In the Constituent Assembly debates, Mr. B.N. Rao, while speaking on the fundamental rights before the committee, referred to various countries and their constitutions relating to judicial review of legislations. In France, there's no provision for judicial review of legislation. He referred to various other countries where there are restrictions. He also referred to US Constitution, from which we have borrowed our fundamental rights, which are the quintessence of our Constitution. And he went on to say that the majority, even after 150 years of the US Constitution, would feel that judicial review is a potent weapon that is necessary for maintaining the checks and balances. But he still left it to the House to decide as to whether judicial review has to be included in the Constitution, and as to whether there should be any limitations on the power of courts in exercising judicial review, especially over legislations. Where do we find this judicial review in our Constitution? If you see Article 13 of the Constitution of India, it says that any law that is made contrary to the fundamental rights in Part 3 of the Constitution are void. You have Article 32, which is a guaranteed fundamental right to the citizens of this country to approach the Supreme Court in case of violation of any of the fundamental rights. This is a guaranteed right. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar, while speaking in the Constituent Assembly, said that Article 32 is the heart of the Constitution, without which the Constitution might not survive. He said that if somebody asked me to pick up one article in the Constitution, which is very important, he said, I'll pick up Article 32. Constitutional courts, like the high courts in the country, have been conferred powers by Article 226 of the Constitution to review legislations and executive action. Judicial reviews specifically being conferred by these articles, it cannot be said that there can be a serious debate about judicial review of legislations in this country. When I said Article 13 says that all legislations in violation of fundamental rights are void, somebody has to decide whether it's void or not, whether they're void or not, and it is only the Constitution. So, and that is the only way that fundamental rights of citizens are protected. With judicial review not being a debate for today's discussion about executive action, with which I am not dealing with now, and we are concerned with judicial review of legislations, even judicial review of legislations by courts going overboard is subject matter of criticism. The opprobrium that is raised to this judicial review is that courts, while reviewing legislations, are exceeding their limitations in interfering with them. But the fact of the matter is that there are in Parliament or the state legislatures are judicially reviewable. They are. The Constitution categorically mentions that they are. And though we do not have a rigid separation of powers, it is well accepted that the three organs of the state operate in different spheres that are given to them, though there might be some small encroachments here and there. And even separation of powers is a basic structure of the Constitution, as has been recognized by the Supreme Court in judgments which are delivered from Keshavananda Bharati onwards. Taking judicial review of legislation out of the discussion now, what is exactly the debate about the counter-majoritarian difficulty, where the courts are creating problems for the smooth functioning of a democracy? The major debate pertains to constitutional amendments and the court interfering with even those amendments. I should tell you to start with that Article 368 of the Constitution refers to amendments to be made to the Constitution. This would be the subject matter of today's discussion. Whether there is power conferred on the Supreme Court and the constitutional courts, that is the high courts, to interfere with constitutional amendments. We do not have parliamentary supremacy in this country like the UK. We only have constitutional supremacy. Constitution is the document by which all the organs of the state are bound by, judiciary, executive, as well as the parliament. So when the parliament, in exercise of its constituent power, mind you, I am using this word constituent power, and then makes amendments to the Constitution, whether the courts, who are also creatures of the Constitution, have any role in interfering with those amendments made to the Constitution is the question. After independence, the Prime Minister wanted to bring in legislations for agrarian reforms. And certain legislations that were brought were declared to be unconstitutional by high courts. To protect the legislations, there was an amendment made by insertion of Article 31. I will not go into the details. The amendments that were made to the Constitution were subject matter of challenge before the Supreme Court. In Shankari Prasad and Sajan Singh, I deal with both these judgments together. The argument on behalf of persons who have challenged these constitutional amendments was that the expression law that is used in Article 13 would include a constitutional amendment also. And the Supreme Court had the jurisdiction to rule on the validity of these constitutional amendments. The Supreme Court was reluctant to interfere by holding that constitutional amendments would not fall within the expression law because they were not specifically included, and that the constitutional amendments are made in the exercise of the constituent power of the parliament. And they held that the constitutional amendments are beyond challenge. Courts cannot look into them. And the 17th Amendment, which was subject matter of Shankari Prasad, was challenged again, and an 11-judge bench of the Supreme Court re-looked into the 17th Amendment. A majority of 6-5, the majority judgment being written by Chief Justice Subbarao, it was held that a constitutional amendment that is made by Article 368 of the Constitution of India falls within the expression law as it appears in Article 13, and held that fundamental rights that are guaranteed to the citizens of this country are immutable and inalienable, and they cannot be either abrogated or abridged by an amendment to be made by the Constitution, which means, in simple words, that fundamental rights cannot be interfered with by the Constitution by making an amendment, constitutional amendment. Golaknath was presenting a difficulty, so it was thought that the judgment of Golaknath has to be gotten over. And that's how two amendments were made to the Constitution again, that is the 24th Amendment and the 25th Amendment. Article 13(4) was brought in by trying to take away the force of Article 13, by which it was mentioned that constitutional amendments would not be subject matter of 13, which means that they are taken outside the purview of 13. In Keshwananda Bharati, which is called the fundamental rights case, 13 judges decided that Golaknath, which is a judgment by 11 judges, is not correct law. Even fundamental rights also can be amended by the Constitution, exercise of the constituent power under Article 368, with a rider that the essential features of the Constitution, which are now known as the basic structure of the Constitution, cannot be altered. With reference to fundamental rights, it was held by this 13-judge bench in Keshwananda Bharati that you cannot abrogate the fundamental rights, but you can abridge, or you can place certain limitations that can be done, provided you're not interfering with the basic structure of the Constitution. What is this basic structure? Basic structure in simple terms would be the essential features of our Constitution without which the Constitution cannot survive. Where did this come from? There was a professor from Germany, one Conrad, who visited the Banaras Hindu University and gave a lecture about a principle in Germany called Grundnorm. Grundnorm is a principle that is there in the Weimar Constitution, which is the German Constitution, which was made in 1938. And the basis of the German Constitution is the dignity of an individual, which cannot be compromised in any situation at all. And that Grundnorm was what was propounded or what was spoken about by Conrad in his lecture, which was quoted by Mr. Nambiar, who was arguing the Keshwananda Bharati case, and this appeal to the Supreme Court. Were there any traces of this basic structure earlier? Justice Madholkar in his dissent in the 1960s mentioned about it, saying that though you can amend the constitution, but you cannot take away the essential features of the constitution. What are these essential features of the constitution? Like, you have this country is sovereign. This country is republican, with the democratic nature of this country. You have separation of powers, which cannot be interfered with. You have the unity of the country, which is also very important. Features like this were said to be the basic features of the constitution, which said this is the basic structure. You can make your amendments to the constitution, there's no problem at all, but otherwise don't tinker with these basic features of the constitution, because the entire shape of the constitution would change. With this rider, the 24th and 25th amendments have not been interfered with by the constitution. H.M. Sirvai, who was a constitutional scholar, he said that judicial review is undemocratic, and the court has crossed its limits by bringing in a principle of basic structure of the constitution for interfering with even a constitutional amendment, which is not permissible, because the court was said to be usurping jurisdiction and trying to become a powerful branch when it was supposed to be the least dangerous branch. But the events that followed Keshavanand Bharati, which was a judgment that was delivered by the Supreme Court in 1973, are very interesting. Mrs. Gandhi lost the case in Allahabad High Court, where there was a challenge to her election. The judgment was to the effect that she indulged in corrupt practices and her election was set aside. She made an amendment to the constitution, which was the 39th amendment, by which the election to the post of president, vice president, and including herself, the prime minister, were taken beyond judicial review, and that was made retrospective. So judicial review was completely taken away by validating her election. Looking at this event, the biggest critic of this counter-majoritarian difficulty, H.M. Sirvai also changed his views about basic structure. He said the principle of basic structure, which was invented by the court, is for the betterment of people in a democracy. The 39th Amendment was under challenge before the Supreme Court, and then the judicial review being taken away by an amendment by validating the election was found to be contrary to the basic structure, and the amendment was struck down. To get over this judgment, another attempt was made by a 42nd Amendment being brought in, where the Parliament sought to place limitations on the power of judicial review, and no limitations that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction, but Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises, for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction, but Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction, but Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction, but Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for video conferencing in courts. So living in Delhi, we have problems with our connectivity also. I think there was a problem of connectivity. I'll get back to the 9th schedule about which I was speaking. The number of statutes which were included in the 9th schedule were swelling. The Supreme Court had to take a look of look at the ninth schedule to find out whether judicial review is permissible. Matters pertaining to statutes in the ninth schedule. In IR Coelho versus the state of Tamil Nadu, Chief Justice Sabharwal said that you cannot take away even the ninth schedule beyond the judicial review. And in certain circumstances, even the validity of those statutes which are included in the ninth schedule can be looked into for the purpose of finding out whether they are in violation of the basic structure of the Constitution of India. I've just told you about the genesis of the development of genesis and development of law in constitutional amendments and their interference with by the constitutional courts. The denunciation of this practice of judicial review in constitutional amendments, it comes from various legal scholars. Tempton Nandiyarjuna, who was a former Solicitor General of India, who assisted Mr. Sirwai in Keshavan Bharati, has been a critic of this basic structure doctrine and the power that the Supreme Court has assumed in interfering with constitutional amendments. He relies upon Bickel's principle of counter-majoritarian difficulty being undemocratic by saying that the will of the people, which is carried out by the parliamentarians, cannot be reviewed by the courts while exercising their power. He also refers to several judgments that were delivered by the Supreme Court of India. And he says, please leave it to the people to decide what they want for themselves, especially in a matter pertaining to constitution. He relies upon the American scholars who were supporting judicial review of legislations by saying that it is open to the Congress to make amendments to the Constitution which is beyond judicial review. So he says even in USA, the Supreme Court doesn't interfere with constitutional amendments, but in India, we have found out a novel method of bringing in basic structure theory and then interfering with constitutional amendments. He also made a comment upon what has been done by the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi, where due process of law has been brought in when it was especially not included in Article 21 during the Constituent Assembly debates. To be clear, I'll take a minute to tell you that when there was a discussion about Article 21, the protection of right to life and liberty of an individual, it was decided that due process of law shall not be included, and it was substituted by the words procedure established by law, which means the article as it stands today reads that the life and liberty of a person cannot be taken away except in accordance with procedure established by law. Due process being an instrument by which power is conferred on the courts to interfere with the legislations on merits, which was being done in USA, was intentionally not included, the words due process. But by Maneka Gandhi, procedural due process has been brought in by Justice Bhagwati, where it says every action can be challenged, every legislation can be challenged if the procedure is not fair and reasonable. We are not concerned with that for today's discussion, but Nandiyarjuna also criticizes that. As it appears, the difficult problem here appears to be that in a constitution where separation of powers, though not rigidly stated, have been demarcated, where the parliament makes laws, where parliament makes amendments to the constitution as well, the executive implements the laws, and the judiciary interprets the laws. As and when the judiciary finds relief was not granted to Marbury, was relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction. But Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation had to travel from Georgia across the river Mississippi to the west of the river. And a large number of these people who were traveling died. This travel that they undertook is referred to as a trail of tears. According to the Creek Nation settlement, vast extents of land in the present state of Oklahoma were given to the Native Indians. And this settlement gave them certain rights, including adjudication of disputes by the tribal courts. And this settlement has not been repealed by the Congress, though there were so many other settlements that have been entered into between the Indians by the Congress, and then a large number of issues were settled. The Major Crimes Act made by the state of Oklahoma was made applicable to even the Native Indians without reference to the Creek settlement. When Megret was convicted for 3 offenses committed against a fellow Indian under the Major Crimes Act, he appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court delivered a judgment on 9th of July 2020. And in that judgment, by a majority written by Gorsuch, Megret, who was also supported by the Native Indians, succeeded. The Supreme Court held that the Native Indians, who are about 10% of the population in Oklahoma, have been given certain tracts of land by a settlement that was made in 1832, which still continues to be in force. And for offenses that are committed by a Native Indian against a fellow Indian, can be tried only by a federal court or by a tribal court and not by a state court under the MCA. Once a promise has been made by the Congress, it has to be implemented, and MCA is not applicable to Native Indians is what was held. Why I am mentioning about this case is because of this reason. I refer to the 4th note in Carolyn Products, which said that judicial review would be strictly implemented as and when there is a problem pertaining to insular and discrete minorities and individuals. You all know about the recent killing of George Floyd in the United States of America, which has led to several demonstrations, not only from the blacks but from the whites also. And the slogan is Black Lives Matter. The history of not only the USA but even our country would show that minorities and the underprivileged people do not have equal protection of laws in spite of the inscription in the document, that is the Constitution, that we have equal protection of laws, be it the 14th Amendment in US Constitution or Article 14 in our Constitution. That has been the complaint. If at all persons belonging to these groups who are minorities or individuals who are complaining of violation of their rights, to raise a grievance, there should be a forum for this grievance to be raised. They cannot go back to the parliament and then say, please redress this grievance. Or they cannot even go and then plead before the executive that don't commit these excesses or don't permit these excesses to be committed. And this can be done only by this independent body, which are courts, which act as checks and balances. So, our constitution being the supreme document, which is the Suprema Lex, and fundamental rights of individuals being the goal of the constitution, protection of rights of individuals is the lookout of the constitution, the courts. Now, the question is whether the court is the custodian for the constitution. On one hand, you can say, yes, it is the custodian because the court interprets the constitution. And the constitution is what the court says. That's what Chief Justice Hughes said. The constitution is what the court says it is. But are there any limitations on the exercise of power of interpretation by the courts about the constitution? There are. Constitutionalism is something which is kept in mind by the courts when they interpret the constitution. Constitutional principles are also kept in mind by the judges when they look into the provisions of the constitution, or for that matter of fact, the provisions of any statutes which come before the court for interpretation. And any interpretation beyond those constitutional principles is not correct. So when all these are kept in mind and the constitution is interpreted in accordance with the well-established principles to protect the fundamental rights, it cannot be said that the counter-majoritarian is a difficulty. Actually, the counter-majoritarian force that lies in the courts is for the well-being of mankind and for the betterment of the country. And that's what was exactly said by Justice Chandrachud in Navtej Johar. What is this constitutionalism about? Constitutionalism is something which is used for the purpose of keeping all the organs of the government in check and to ensure that the balance between these organs in exercise of their powers is maintained. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal control of government would be necessary. In a government of men over men, the difficulty lies in enabling the government to control the governed. And the most important aspect is oblige itself to control, which means what? That for people to realize that they have certain powers is very easy, because the powers are conferred by the Constitution. But for people to realize that there are limitations of power that is given to them. They are not angels, they are men. This is what Madison said in the Federalist paper which he wrote about. When you talk about the judicial review and the courts acting in excess of the powers that are given to them, there is some sort of a criticism that courts are exceeding their limits in taking over the powers that are earmarked for the executive, in also interfering with legislations easily on grounds which are not really acceptable. Judicial activism is the subject matter of denunciation, opposition, saying that courts cannot try to run the country. Overall, in these 60 years, if you look at the interpretation of Article 21 of the Constitution of India and the expansion of the words life and liberty as they occur in the Constitution, you would see that it has only improved the living conditions of people in this country. Whatever has been mentioned in the Constitution, some of them in the directive principles have been brought and then put in Article 21 by expansion of rights, right to food, right to health, right to shelter, right to a decent living. The focal point of the dignity of individual has been given a lot of importance while interpreting Article 21 of the Constitution for protection of the fundamental rights of individuals, for protecting their dignity. Without dignity, without human dignity, the existence of a human being is animal existence. That's what the court has said. How is it can be said that the courts are acting beyond their jurisdiction? Interpretation of the Constitution is generally made by taking into account the evolving standards of human decency in an evolving society. In a dynamic society, times change. Right to privacy being developed by the courts, right to privacy being protected as being fundamental to human being, is an interpretation of the provisions of a constitution. This really doesn't interfere with legislation, but this interpretation also receives criticism saying that whether unenumerated rights in the constitution are brought in by the judges on their personal opinions of rights. Whatever is not written in the constitution is being read into the constitution is one criticism. Might be that a judgment of the Griswold versus Connecticut pertaining to contraband being made available to couples. He said that this is a penumbral right. It might not be mentioned in the Constitution. There's no enumeration of this. But the criticism is that who are you to bring in these rights and read them in? It is for the Parliament to make it. This is the theory of the originalists. Applying law to what has been made by the constitutional framers and the Parliament is the only job of the court. Is it so? I personally feel that whatever is being done in the name of judicial review cannot be restricted only to interpretation of the laws. There is an additional duty that is conferred on the courts to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens of this country. If the Constitution has to survive, courts have to be active in protecting the fundamental rights. But then, can the courts keep interfering with what the executive does? Or can the courts be interfering with legislations? It is not as if the courts are not aware of the seriousness of legislations being interfered with by them unless there is a serious violation of the constitution. Normally they don't interfere. Insofar as executive action is concerned, executive action is subject matter of judicial review, and any excesses that are committed by the executive are corrected by the courts. This is the duty insofar as the courts are concerned for protection of, again, the basic rights of the individuals. If all the organs of the state, that is the parliament, the executive, in India, the parliament and executive are in fusion, like the Westminster system, and the judiciary, two organs as well as the judiciary, they act without any antimony, without any hostility. The democracy will function smoothly. There should be a healthy respect between these three organs. You see, in the recent times, there is criticism about inaction of the judiciary in not protecting the fundamental rights of citizens by coming to their rescue and acting in accordance with the dictates of the executive. On the other hand, there is criticism that courts are interfering with legislations that are made by the state legislatures and the parliaments, and they do not know what their limitations are. People who man these constitutional posts have to be very careful in ensuring that the dignity of the institutions are not lost. We as judges in constitutional courts, as well as the subordinate judiciary, have to be very careful in not making any comments about the executive or the parliament. They are discharging their constitutional duties within the sphere which is allotted to them, and they need respect. At the same time, the functionaries in the executive as well as the legislature will do well to remember that there is no point in unnecessarily criticizing courts for interfering with legislations. Aaron Barak, the former Chief Justice of Israel Supreme Court, said that the continuous tension between the executive and parliament on one side and the judiciary on the other side is healthy for a democracy. He said that if the executive and the judiciary get together, then the liberty of the individual is lost in the bargain. He said that the judges have to live with this criticism that branches because they do not have the wherewithal or facility to counter the attack of the members of the other branches of the government. The rights of an individual, which are the most important in a democracy, will be saved and protected. Thank you very much. Is in judicial review. Though ultimately the relief was not granted to Marbury, but relating to his commission for appointment as a circuit judge, on the ground that the US Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction and only appellate jurisdiction, but Marbury versus Madison is cited in all democracies whenever the topic of judicial review arises for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court. which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall is that liberty of an individual is the focus of the Constitution, and every individual who has been injured by state action or by legislation should be having a remedy, and that remedy is in judicial review. Though ultimately relief was not granted to Marbury, federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution, which would be unconstitutional by a federal court, which is judicial review. The principle of law that was stated by John Marshall, a written limitation. When it comes to judicial review of legislations, I told you that it can be done only on grounds of competence, on ground that there is a violation of the Constitution. Policy decisions are not interfered with, and the courts do not substitute the wisdom of the parliament, which means that if the parliament says something and the judge feels that it is wrong, according to me that this is right, normally we don't do it, no judge does it. The limitations that are placed on judicial review is only for protection of fundamental rights and any law that is made by the parliament not being in accordance with the principles of the Constitution. That is the limitation.
Please, Manoj. We have next question by Dr. Mohan Bolla, Principal. Kindly throw light on constitutional morality to render social justice to the needy, deserving masses like.
After 1803, for about 200 years, the recent times, and it has been explained by the Supreme Court to mean that it is not morality of what an individual thinks is right, and constitutional morality should not be confused with social morality. Constitutional morality is upholding the principles of the Constitution, and especially the essence of fundamental rights. And constitutional morality is also an essence for protection of constitutionalism, is what the Supreme Court says. So there's nothing very special about constitutional morality, except that constitutional morality is to act in accordance with the principles of the Constitution.
Thank you, Manoj. Next question by.
He said that the root difficulty of judicial review is in its counter-majoritarian approach, which is undemocratic. According to Bickel, the parliamentarians in a democracy, in the recent judgment of the US Supreme Court in cases filed by Trump, the president of the United States of America, challenging the subpoenas, which were sent to his bankers, and even a subpoena sent by the grand jury of a criminal court. He said that he has executive prerogative and then he did not want to reveal this. Chief Justice Roberts, in a majority of 7-2, said that the days of the kings have gone, and the president of USA is like any other person in the country, and he has to answer the subpoenas. Even king can do no wrong is a principle in England which has been forgotten. Even king is under the law, is what was stated even in the 17th century in England. They said that law is above the king. To start with, that was a law that the king can do no wrong. But that has changed everywhere with changing times, especially in our country. There is no unfettered right that is conferred on any individual in this country. Every person is to be submissive to law, and we are not ruled by men, but we are ruled by law. That is the beauty of democracy.
Please, Manoj. So we have a couple of more questions.
A federal legislation can be declared contrary to the Constitution. Two more.
Please. I would now request the panelists, if they have any questions, they may pose the questions before.
Whenever the topic of judicial review arises, for the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. A federal legislature is the focus of, because of problems on my side about availability of Wi-Fi connectivity. I think that I have tried to share with you what I feel about judicial review and how important it is, and that it cannot be said to be a counter-majoritarian difficulty, but it should be considered a counter-majoritarian tool for the protection of the rights of the people. I'm very happy to share my views with you. I thank the Advocates Association of Bangalore for giving me this chance to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Your Lordships.
For the purpose of highlighting the importance of judicial review. After 1803, for about 200 years, courts in US have been reviewing legislations on the doctrine of due process. Several legislations have been struck down as being contrary to the constitutional principles, which has received some sort of a reaction from scholars. The first was Alexander Bickel, who wrote a book, The Least Dangerous Branch.